Besides, people can give you all the funny looks they want. You're the one with the sword. My name is Shannon, and unfortunately, Amanda can't be with us today, but we both welcome you back to a world of bookish adventures. And today I am so excited to share that we have, for the first time on our show, co-authors with us. We have Mike Melsaul and David Tullius with us, and we're going to be talking about their new book, The Paragon Exordium. This is a genre-bending, epic rural fantasy book that takes readers on a nonstop, action-packed adventure where the battle for survival has begun. Fans of The Walking Dead and The Lord of the Rings will be enticed by this epic story that shares these themes of survival, sacrifice, and self-discovery. Welcome, Michael and David. So thrilled to have you on the show.
Thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be here. Or I am.
I am also thrilled to be here. Thank you for that.
I like how we're not going to talk for each other. I like that.
That's right. We're independent minds.
So I always have to start. And first of all, I got to give you guys a huge congratulations that your book, Paragon Exordium, has a current rating on Goodreads of 4.62. So that's amazing. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, our Amazon is even better.
Oh, I didn't check Amazon. Do you know what your rating is on Amazon?
Well, I check it every day because I'm addicted and it's a problem. And we're trying to hit like 50 reviews before the anniversary. Currently, we're sitting at 36 and a 4.8 out of 5.
Okay, when's the anniversary?
May 20th.
May 20th. Okay, so good to know. We'll have to check back in with you to see what that final review is.
Yeah. So we're trying to hit 50 reviews on Amazon because that's when Amazon starts promoting it. And so we have a deal with our readers. And if we can hit 50 reviews in 50 states by the end of that time limit, we're going to pick one of the reviewers to submit a name to be used in book 2.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to mark Tennessee off your list. You got your Tennessee. So I'm going to do that. And then secondly, and I normally don't plug this in our show, but I will say for you guys, I have a Facebook group called Arc Dragons. It connects reviewers and authors together. And we have like almost 2,500 people in the group. It's crazy. Wow. So make sure when we're done, I'm going to send you that information. Let's get you over to the Facebook group and you can share that on there as well.
Absolutely.
Sir. Okay, but let's get back to why you're here. So I think before we start any type of conversation, you guys need to share with me, share with our listeners, what is a genre-bending rural fantasy? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Dave, you want to take this one?
Sure. So genre-bending rural fantasy, right? So when the classic way that it is described, when you mix, modern themes, modern setting with, fantasy elements, fantasy creatures, etc., right? That's typically called urban fantasy. Except the way that usually goes is, right, the gritty underdark of a major city, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, something like that. Well, we've set the story in rural Georgia, and many of the themes that you would find in something urban don't exist here, right? It's not a big town, and they go out into the wilderness to do these things. So it's a little different, and I feel like it would be disingenuous to market it as urban fantasy when they don't spend a ton of time in cities, at least not until end of the book.
And then genre bending, to me, I would read that as you're blending more than one particular genre together. So is that how you're seeing that whole genre bending, or is it more like what you said between urban and rural?
I think it's definitely both. We set out to write a fantasy, but there's so many different subclasses and subgenres of fantasy, right? That one just doesn't encapsulate the story we've written. So like there's military elements, there's adventure story elements, sword and sorcery elements. There's just so many different elements to it that all encapsulate it. But usually with fantasy, you see it being in like a fantastical world that either people are portaled to, or someplace like Middle Earth or Allegasia or something. This story is taking place entirely in our world. And so it's a contemporary story. So you've got elements of old fashioned fantasy, but you've also got modern elements and things like that. It's an adventure story. It's epic, right? But it's also grounded. There's some horror themes throughout there, some darker stuff in it. We write chapters a certain way to have certain different vibes. So yeah, it's a blend of a lot of different things to create a unique story.
Yeah, it is an apocalypse, right? It is a post-apocalyptic story with all the fantasy elements thrown into it. So it's hard to nail down.
No, it does. And I think even with the little blurb that I read kind of at the beginning, if you are a fan of The Walking Dead, if you're a fan of The Lord of the Rings, so it sounds like you're bringing kind of all these different subsets together and giving people a book that they're going to love no matter which side of the genre coin they're on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even as I was looking and doing some reading and research on you guys, I mean, it looks like you guys, have orcs and elves and dwarves and terrifying creatures and fae, and I mean all these different elements some way somehow kind of make an appearance through your story.
Yep. We discussed early on, one of the concepts we sort of played with was the idea that any fantasy being that humanity has considered or thought of has been a direct result of them existing in our history that we've just forgotten about. So that's a key element of the story is these things used to exist in our world, and they come back in this one cataclysmic moment, and now anything could potentially show up around the corner or something along those lines. So yeah, there's nothing off the table of what could appear in this world.
I just got to throw it out there for the geeky people, the geeky side. It almost sounds like that Doctor Strange moment, when
Yes.
all the people come to fight at the end. So.
Right. The portals moment. Yeah.
Portals going through. So I actually think that's a great segue to why don't you guys talk to us a little bit about the book? No spoilers. We try to be spoiler free here, but to tell us a little bit about your book.
It's a third person point of view, multi point of view story. We've got three primary main characters: Peter Blair, Sarah Young, and Sean Castillo, and they all are in a small town in Paragon, Georgia. And our story picks up mid-apocalypse. Essentially, the sky breaks due to a magical spell, and they don't really know what's going on because technology's faltered, and they're kind of isolated in this small little town. But then they start to encounter magical creatures and whatnot. And so it's about them exploring this world, exploring newfound powers, trying to survive in this apocalyptic setting. Because a lot of stories you see with apocalypses, I think, usually pick up well into or after the apocalypse. This is an apocalypse that is occurring during the story. And so they're trying to figure out what's left of humanity and how they can survive humanity and what they have to face against. And there's all kinds of different creatures and monsters throughout that. And it's a unique setting because it's like rural Georgia, kind of like The Walking Dead takes place a lot in rural Georgia. So you've got townsfolk and the things that come with that, the sort of cultural biases and whatnot that come with that environment. Dave, do you want to add anything to that?
As far as story themes and elements, yeah, and no spoilers is rough to do.
We try.
I don't want to keep everything away, but yeah, like as Mick's saying,
a heads up.
Yes, okay, so heads ups, right? Yeah, so yeah, following the three main characters, right? It is each one is has their unique way that they're exploring this, right? Like Mick mentioned, there's people that start to uncover magical abilities. There's individuals who are kind of primed, prepped, and ready for the worst things to happen, and they have a different way of dealing with disaster scenarios than say some of the younger points of view where you're a teenager or a young adult and you're just trying to figure out your own life, let alone midway through an apocalypse. So we try to do our best to give a pretty decent spread. So hopefully it'll appeal to people of different ages, maybe different status in life of where you're kind of at, settled or not, and a different way to get into the story.
And I have to tell you, I found it really interesting as I was reading some of the reviews that were on your Goodreads channel. One of your reviewers were like, I love fantasy books. This is such a great fantasy book. And then, I had another one like, oh, this was such great action. It's such a great action book. So in a lot of common threads throughout your reviews were the character developments were fantastic. The multi-point of views, which personally I love in a book, were great. The complex emotions and it I wouldn't necessarily call it world building per se, but maybe setting building, scenario building that you guys did throughout the book really kind of goes through. So it sounds like you're hitting on all those different aspects, and depending on where the reader's coming from, what genres they love, they really find and hook onto that in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an epic fantasy, right? And that scares a lot of readers. But I like to say, and I'm saying this because of what people have told me, I think it's probably the easiest to read epic fantasy anyone will ever pick up. It is a phenomenal starter fantasy. It's a great fantasy book for people who don't usually read fantasy, but it's also a good book for people who love fantasy because it's got things people who love fantasy will recognize. It's a love letter to a lot of fantasy because we're both big fans of fantasy, but it's also got this setting and this backdrop of our world and these characters unfamiliar with these fantasy elements that are now discovering them. And so there's a lot of perspective for a non-fantasy reader that helps them ease them into this setting and helps them sort of relate to this setting and have to do with that setting. And like, there's a theme. One of the main characters, like Peter Blair, is sick and tired of all the fantasy stuff as the story goes on. And he just gets more and more. He's like, okay, that's magic. Cool. Great. Awesome. Moving on. So
you would have loved the quote that I've chosen as my favorite at this current time, Nick. You'll love that.
Well, do you want to share that with us?
So it's really it is very funny because it was not pre-planned, and Nick had said, you might need to keep a quote or two handy that you like. So it is Peter being sick and tired of the fantasy creatures. It says, well, anyone else have anything they want to put out on the table? Any dragons or aliens in the room? Any shadows over my shoulder guiding my actions? No, just an elf in disguise here to evaluate the human species. So he's just so done at that point, and it's perfect that Nick brought that up.
That's good. Yeah. If you want to care,
really. And I have to share one of the ones that I really liked that you guys added, I think goes right along with that. And I'm not sure who's saying it in the book because you guys didn't tell me, but it says, as it turned out, bored people really like to hear themselves talk, regardless of how boring they or their lives happen to be. And that one just made me laugh for like minutes. I got to be honest with you.
That's good. Yeah, that's a Sarah Young line. She's a journalism student and a bit of a wizard at some points.
Oh, I love that.
That is one of my favorite lines I've written, though.
Yeah, I know, that was great. So I gotta ask because you don't often hear of co-authors working on a book together, and in my mind, I think this must have been the most complicated thing. Like, forget about fighting about what we're having for dinner tonight. Like, we're writing a book. So can you share with us, how did you guys get here, and how did it work together once you decided to start doing the book?
I feel like I usually field this question, Dave, so I'm going to make you take it this time.
Okay, yes, it's only fair. So I found out about the project from Mick when he needed some individuals to sort of see how it was going, do a little bit of like pre-reading, editing. At the time, I was pursuing a undergraduate degree in English literature, so it seemed like a good idea at the time. And as I got into the project, it slowly turned from just edit things here or kind of alpha read here to making suggestions, getting into the story and saying, hey, where is this going to go? And then it morphed at that point, I mean, rather quickly into, well, I believe very strongly in the basis for the story, the quality of the work, and what Mick's trying to go for. It became, weekly strategy sessions as chapters came out. Originally chapters were releasing on Patreon as like a weekly, as a subscribe by chapter came out. So planning the chapter, editing it, getting it ready for people to review on a timetable, and it's become it's become so much more than just, hey, can you look at this and make sure that I'm not crazy, to active involvement in writing and building out the world, and sanity checking each other and getting after it. It was how to say a project that I've moved a lot. I've been in and out of the country, all over the place, and I got one kind of constant in all of that, and that's been able to sit down on a semi-regular basis, no matter what's going on, and try to focus on this project. It's been very centering. I got recruited and I got suckered in. That's the tagline.
Well, I think the biggest question is, did you bring a dragon? Did you bring fae? Did you bring any monsters with you?
Well, okay. So as things have developed, I'd like to think that I have found some fun monsters to bring in. Most of the more fantastical elements in the one that is currently published came from Mick. However, without spoilers, that is not going to be the case as things develop for the sequel. I brought more on the Walking Dead down in nitty gritty side for the first one. Just for instance, the main sort of point of view character, Peter, in the first one is a veteran. He's working as a private military contractor. This kind of martial background. I was able to come and kind of fit in, get some of that. Bring a little bit more realism to how soldiers kind of interact with each other, and how that sort of world works outside of a Hollywood movie, to the best of my ability. Right, everyone's experiences are different. So on the contrary, yeah, Mick brought a lot of the fantasy on the first one, and I brought some of the more gritty grounded things. However, sequel, I think we're much more mixed up, and I think that's to the work's benefit.
And actually, that was going to be my next question. In reading some of the reviews, there's been quite a bit of, I've had to duct tape my heart back together. I've left feeling scared for the characters, not necessarily for the unknown, but for humanity itself. And so there's definitely some tidbits out there that we know there's going to be a sequel, but the question is there going to be more? Is this going to become a world building series for you?
Oh, we get to let Mick talk about that. That's his favorite. Well, in any case, wherever Mick has gone. Yeah, yes. Short answer, yes, there is more planned.
You're talking to a mute.
Oh, of course.
It's like he was there, but then
Shall I continue?
No, I can take it. You're right.
Very well.
My favorite parts. So the first series, Paragon Exordium, or the Paragon Chronicles, or we're still workshopping the series title, but we're doing 3 main books. It's going to be Paragon Exordium, Paragon Attrition, and Paragon Retribution are the current floating titles. So that's going to be the main series to get us started. And then Dave has pitched a couple ideas. I've come up with a couple ideas on some follow-up series that would take place in the world and sort of expand that world out a couple years, follow up with some characters, and maybe do a series like 100 years in this world's future and just sort of build on that. But there's limitless potential to this world, and this is something I really want to do with the series over time. It's turn it into more of a franchise, and I really want to draw in other authors and have them start creating things in this space and turn it into like a Star Wars situation where you have dozens of different authors creating in this world and in this universe, because there's so much unexplored that we don't get to because our story is so localized and so centralized, that there's a whole world out there to explore. There's all kinds of different genres we can explore. If someone wants to write a fantasy or romantasy in this world, they can, using this backdrop. If someone wants to write a horror novella or something along those lines, they can in this backdrop. So we have a lot of other projects we'd love to do. We want to do like a D&D sort of podcast set in the world. Dave is working on a novella spinoff that takes place and focuses on some of the characters from book 1 who disappear, and he's doing sort of a Southern Gothic, The Odyssey retelling with that. And then I've got 2 readers who enjoyed it so much that they're writing their own fan fiction spinoffs that I would love to somehow incorporate into this world, the world of Paragon.
I think that's fantastic. And it's so funny. And you pulled it out of my brain. I'm sitting here was thinking this would make such a great D&D campaign.
Yes.
Like I was like,
We're
oh my
so glad you
God.
agree. Yeah.
My shadow wielder character would have so much fun. So I love it. But, and I got to say, and I really appreciate your forward vision on this, because I know when I deep dive, when I fall in love with the series, I want the books. I want the novellas. I want this. I want to know what they're eating for dinner and what favorite ice cream they have. Like, I want to go into these worlds. So I think it's brilliant that you guys are going into this with that forward thought to give your readers and potentially either collaborating with other authors that opportunity. So I think that's fantastic. This is the point in the show I always like to go to my authors and ask, what is your advice? We have a listener out there who has this idea bubbling in their head, but they're afraid to take that first step. What advice would you give to them?
That's a good question. I mean, write it down. That's the biggest step, is just actually getting started. I had the idea for this book years before I started actually working on it. And it doesn't go anywhere. You can do all the world building in your head you want until you actually start writing it. And then it's progressing. Then you're actually making something because you're actually putting pen to paper. And I actually started writing this by putting pen to paper to try and really isolate my time a little more and see if I could. And I wrote like the first 40,000 words all by hand just to try and engage in a different format so I wouldn't be as easily distracted by social media and whatnot. So that would be my first bit of my second bit of advice was find a team. That's something we have that's really special to our work is I've got a team. My wife's an English major. Dave's an English major. They're both heavily involved in the world and creation and the writing and stuff. And that helps so much because I have people I can bounce ideas off of. I can have people say that's dumb to me when I'm overdoing something. I can have people say that's too boring, go back and rewrite it. And so having that team of people I trust who are also willing to tell me things like, hey, if this wasn't good, they would be like, hey, this isn't good. Don't spend your time on it. But they're there to reaffirm that it is good and help me through that process. So yeah, my two bits of advice would be actually write it down, which sounds silly, but the number of people with book ideas, everyone I talk to has a book idea, right? But only a few of them actually write it down, and then have a team, put together a team if you can.
Yeah, I'd say on top of that, right? Whether you can get a team of people, some people don't have the luxury of being able to build that team right off the beginning, but having some sort of way to keep yourself accountable is key. For us, like Mick said, having both of us to feed off of each other and keep each other on track. Hey, this has to be done, by X time, and we're going to meet on this day. Like, well, okay, we got to keep ourselves, on pace and on track, right? Whether you have someone that's doing that for you, like a writing buddy, whether you're posting it to I don't want to sound like an ancient millennial at this point, but to a blog or to some other online way, TikTok videos, of what your writing process is, right? Whatever means you can find to have people keep you accountable, I think is super important, because then like Mick also said, it's not just a couple pages of a manuscript you tuck into a drawer and forget about, or yeah, you never, oh yeah, I have this great idea. And it sounds amazing, but you never quite get to it. Just taking that first step to try to get it out there. And, it is challenging, and it is, people can feel embarrassed or self-conscious, but getting it out there in any way you can to at least someone. If I'm accountable to somebody, then it's got to come out.
Absolutely. And I think in all the authors I've had a privilege to meet and interview, I feel like that's almost the common thread is just do it. Just get it out there. Just get it on paper, from idea to actually completing a book just in of itself. So few people truly actually do. So I think that's fantastic advice. So we know that Paragon Exordium is out now. So where can our listeners get a copy of your book?
Yeah, it's available. So we're published internationally, and we're in at least 12 different countries last I checked. So you can get it on any version of Amazon that exists. You can order it off Barnes & Noble. If you're in the US, I have an Etsy shop, and I'll send you a signed copy for actually less than you can get a copy off Amazon. because that's a little better for me as an author, because Amazon takes a lot off the top. But it's basically available anywhere online books are sold in every country. Just look up Paragon Exordium by Mikel Melsaul.
And I gotta ask, I again reading some of your reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are asking about an audiobook. Have you guys ever thought about going that direction?
Yeah, I did auditions earlier in the year, and I was able to work with ACX and find a narrator, a young Irishman named Cormac Brennan, who hasn't done an audiobook before, but he's incredibly talented, and I think he's probably going to make big waves in the narrating scene one day. Who I'm working with to get the audiobook done, and our current ETA on that is June.
Oh, okay. So a couple months from now, not too long.
Yeah, right. Should be like a month after our first year anniversary. We were trying to get it in there on the first year anniversary as sort of a celebratory thing, but these things take time and effort.
Absolutely. Well, definitely keep in touch with us. And if it looks like you're on track for that June date, let us know and we'll be part of that launch party with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely something we need to do as a launch party. That's another one of those things
absolutely.
where I published this.
Write that down.
Write that down. Right. I published this before getting involved in like Book Talk or anything. And that's probably my biggest regret with the whole thing, is not engaging with more indie authors and more creators and seeing the kind of things you can do to sort of hype things up and get things built up. And the community's just been wonderful.
Oh yeah, that's definitely something that if there was a question that had gone unasked, is something that surprised me the most about this is I was very, very apprehensive about the social media aspect, and I'd heard the horror stories from other people about kind of a gatekeeping sort of situation, or social media is just a way for people to sort of take your ideas, and I have been 180 degrees wrong. It's been a pleasure to talk to people about what they're working on and have those questions be asked of us, and just kind of getting out there. And even if it's not on Shop Talk, just the people are always willing to hit you with a joke or a meme or say something something nice, and Mick said we're working on the audiobook. There's people that have decided let's draw something. I want to draw something for in your world, and they come out. I can't draw to save my life, so it's stunning. Someone there's a piece of music that's inspired by it too. So just kind of this whole multimedia ecosystem has been very good. And if there was a final piece of advice I'd want, is that getting involved like that, like Mick said, really was a morale boost. And I think it's been great to try to not only market it but find like-minded people that want to do the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so talking about social media and talking about connections, if our listeners want to connect with you, what are your social media sites?
Yeah, I'm on everything pretty much as just Mikel Melsaul. I'm on TikTok primarily. That's where I do most of my stuff. I'm on Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Instagram. I'm on all of that, but you'll primarily find me active on TikTok and Instagram, just as Mikel Melsaul, MikelMelwasul.
And how about you, David?
I am relegated to the TikTok space. I was dragged there kicking and screaming, but it ended up being a good thing. So on TikTok, I am at David Elberin, Echo Lima Bravo, Oscar Romeo, India November. Yep. Yeah, if you can find Mick, you can certainly find me in support. And that's mostly it for us. So
yeah, he probably gets a billion notifications a week from me tagging him in.
You don't even know. Between TikTok and Discord, if I have a busy day at work, I need to let my phone vibrate for about 5 minutes.
And as always, for those of you that are joining us on YouTube, you see all of social media sites right in front of you. If you are on Spotify, either hop over to our YouTube channel or check out our social media sites, and we will have all of that information listed for you. Well, Mikel, David, I have to say it has been such a pleasure having you on the show today. I loved, and I just have to let you know, this will be my next TBR read because I'm going to give you that Tennessee. So I appreciate you guys, and definitely keep in touch with us as you guys are progressing, because we'd like to follow up and support you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. This was a blast.
Yeah, it's been great. We will very much appreciate the review, and appreciate you giving us the offer to go forward when we launch audiobooks and things. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you all for being with us today. Next week, we'll be taking a trip back in time to season 1, and we'll be having award-winning author Steve Altier with us. Some of you may remember Amanda talked about his book, The Lizardville Ghost Series, on our season 1 Halloween show. And we are so excited that Steve is going to be joining us this year and sharing all his mystery and suspense books. And maybe, just maybe, we'll finally get some answers as to why they call the town Lizardville. But until then, read more books and go explore. Have a great day, everyone.